A virgin Mafia boss waited 5 years for his perfect bride, and instead, 2 obese girls arrived and changed everything. He was the most dangerous man in Moscow, a ruthless Bratva heir who had never been touched, never been broken, a monster waiting for his pure bride. But when his arranged marriage falls apart, 2 curvy sisters show up in ill-fitting wedding dresses, and nothing will ever be the same. One sister trembles. One sister fights. Natasha Petrov isn't just another victim. She's a hidden weapon, disguised as a plus-sized woman society underestimated. And when she slaps the most feared criminal in Russia across his face, she ignites a passion more dangerous than any bullet. He was looking for a virgin bride. She was looking for survival. Together, they'll become legendary. But with enemies circling, a rival crime family plotting revenge, and secrets that could destroy them both, can a monster find redemption in the arms of a woman nobody saw coming? Who really won when 2 obese girls arrived at a mafia boss's wedding? And more importantly, who will survive? Coming soon, Where Darkness Meets Destiny. The pre-dawn Moscow sky bled steel gray as Dmitry Volkov stood motionless before his floor-to-ceiling mirror, adjusting his pristine white Tom Ford suit. Every movement was calculated, every breath controlled. 5 years of waiting culminated today. His wedding day. His fingers traced the platinum cufflinks his murdered mother had given him before her death. She'd made him promise 2 things: remain untouched until marriage, and become a man who honored women, not destroyed them. Today, he would fulfill her final wish. Anastasia Petrov, his bride, promised to him when she was 15 to be delivered pure and perfect on her 20th birthday. He had been patient, celibate, building his criminal empire with surgical precision while preserving himself exactly as his mother wanted. The Moscow penthouse reflected his personality: cold, immaculate, powerful. Expensive Russian crystal reflected his muscular frame. Dark eyes, inherited from generations of Volkov men, scrutinized every detail of his appearance. Nothing could be out of place. Not today. At precisely 1:45 p.m., his driver would take him to the cathedral. 500 Bratva members would witness his wedding. His rise as Pakan, the absolute ruler of their criminal brotherhood, would be sealed with this marriage. By 2 p.m., everything changed. The cathedral doors burst open. Instead of the slim, elegant bride he expected, 2 plus-sized women in ill-fitting white dresses waddled down the aisle. Their father, Viktor Petrov, trembled behind them. Dmitry's rage erupted like volcanic glass, sharp, deadly, transparent. "What is this?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Viktor's sweat dripped. "Forgive me, Dmitry Alexandrovich. Anastasia, she died 6 months ago. Overdose." The cathedral went silent. 500 hardened criminals held their collective breath. The larger twin, Natasha, stepped forward. Her eyes blazed with something Dmitry had never seen. Defiance, pure, unadulterated fury. "We are here," she said in perfect Russian, "as replacement." Dmitry's laugh was ice. "Replacements? You look like cows who wandered into the wrong field." The silence shattered. Natasha's palm connected with his cheek so hard the sound echoed through the cathedral. A red mark bloomed instantly against his olive skin. Nobody moved. In 50 years of Bratva history, no one had ever struck Dmitry Volkov. His hand touched his stinging cheek. His men froze, waiting. Viktor Petrov looked like he might faint. "Everyone out," Dmitry said softly. "Except the Petrov family." The cathedral emptied in seconds. Natasha stood her ground, chin lifted. Her sister Vera cowered behind her, trembling. But Natasha? She looked like she was ready to go to war. And in that moment, something shifted in Dmitry Volkov's world. His perfectly planned future had just been demolished, and something dangerous, something unpredictable, was about to begin. The cathedral echoed with silence. Dust motes danced through shafts of late afternoon light, catching on the elaborate marble floors and empty wedding altar. Dmitry Volkov stood like a razor-sharp statue, his immaculate black Tom Ford suit contrasting against the ornate religious space. His eyes, the color of frozen steel, never left Viktor Petrov. "Explain," Dmitry said. The single word fell like a guillotine blade. Viktor trembled. Sweat beaded across his forehead, creating dark patches on his expensive shirt. Beside him, Vera whimpered softly, her round body shaking with fear. But Natasha, she stood different, tall, defiant. Her curves filled her hastily chosen wedding dress, but there was nothing soft about her stance. "We had no choice," Victor stammered. "Anastasia, she was gone, overdosed. We couldn't tell you." Dimitri's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward the shoulder holster beneath his jacket. His men, 6 of them, all mountain-sized, with eyes like dead sharks, watched silently. Natasha stepped forward. "We are not trash to be discarded," she said, her voice low and fierce. "We are daughters. We are survivors." Something flickered in Dimitri's eyes. Not quite anger, not quite interest. Something dangerous. 4 languages, Natasha continued. University degrees completed through remote learning. We were hidden, yes, but not uneducated. Not worthless. Victor looked terrified. His daughter was challenging a man who could, and likely would, kill them all without blinking. But Natasha didn't waver. "We know who you are," she said. "Pakan of the Moscow Bratva. Your reputation is extensive." A ghost of a smile touched Dimitri's lips. Not warm, predatory. "And what do you know of my reputation?" he asked. "That you're ruthless," Natasha said. "That you keep your word. That family means everything, even if that family is built through blood, not birth." Vera clutched her sister's hand, silent, trembling. But Natasha remained a fortress. Dimitri circled them slowly, like a wolf evaluating prey. His gaze ran over Natasha, not with disgust at her size, but with a calculating intensity that made her skin prickle. "Your father offered both of you," he stated. Not a question. "Because he didn't know your preferences," Natasha shot back. "Because survival sometimes means offering everything." The cathedral felt electric, dangerous, the kind of moment where breathing seemed optional. "And what do you want?" Dimitri asked her directly. "Protection," Natasha said immediately. "For Vera, for myself. We are not asking for mercy. We are negotiating." Something deep in Dimitri's chest, a place long frozen, began to warm. Not with affection, with recognition. This woman was no victim. She was a strategist. 30 days, he said finally. "You will both come to my estate, as guests. Vera will be safe. You..." His eyes locked with Natasha's. "Will learn what it means to be in my world." Victor started to speak. Dimitri's hand moved so fast it was almost invisible. Suddenly, a gun pressed against Victor's temple. "Not a word," Dimitri said coldly. Outside, bulletproof Mercedes waited. Black, imposing. Russian winter light glinting off obsidian windows. As Natasha guided her trembling sister toward the car, she felt Dimitri's gaze burning into her back. Not with hatred, with something far more complex. The first chapter of their story had just begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The black Mercedes glided through the iron gates of the Volkov estate, its tinted windows revealing nothing of the occupants inside. Natasha gripped the edge of her seat, feeling the weight of her sister Vera trembling beside her. 5 years of isolation in rural Siberia hadn't prepared them for this moment. The mansion loomed before them, a modern fortress of steel and granite that spoke of wealth and violence in equal measure. Staff lined the marble entrance, their faces cold and unwelcoming. Natasha knew they were being judged. 2 plus-sized women thrust into a world of razor-sharp expectations. "Stay close," she whispered to Vera. Her sister nodded, mascara already threatening to run with nervous tears. A stone-faced butler approached, his eyes skating over them with barely concealed disdain. "Sweets are prepared," he said in clipped Russian. "Follow me." The interior was a study in controlled opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen diamonds. Priceless art adorned walls that seemed to breathe money and secrets. Natasha caught snippets of whispered conversations, staff discussing them in hushed, cruel tones. "So large," one maid muttered. "The Bratva heir will never..." Natasha's spine straightened. She'd heard every variation of body shaming her entire life. These whispers were nothing new. Their adjoining suites were pristine, but felt more like gilded cages. Vera collapsed onto a silk settee, her anxiety visible in the way her hands shook. "Natasha," she whispered, "what are we going to do?" Before she could answer, a low vibration of power preceded Dmitri Volkov's arrival. He entered like darkness personified. 6'3" of pure masculine threat, dressed in an impeccable black Tom Ford suit that screamed both wealth and danger. His eyes, steel gray and merciless, swept over them. "Dinner. Now." The command was not a request. The dining room was a cathedral of intimidation. 17-foot ceilings, a mahogany table that could seat 20. Dmitri sat at the head, leaving the twins positioned like sacrificial offerings. "You will understand your positions," he began, his Russian accent thick with barely controlled violence. "Vera will be kept comfortable but isolated. Natasha," his gaze locked onto her, "will serve as my personal attendant." Vera whimpered. Natasha's jaw clenched. "I have conditions," Natasha said, shocking even herself with her audacity. One perfect eyebrow rose. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "My sister gets professional therapy for her anxiety. She remains unharmed and comfortable. I'll comply with your requirements." Each word was measured, strategic, silence stretched. Then, unexpectedly, Dmitri laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound, more like the promise of future violence barely contained. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting." By 9 o'clock, Natasha found herself in quarters adjoining Dmitri's private suite. The room was luxurious but felt like a velvet-lined prison. When she tested the door, she discovered the terrible truth. It locked from the outside. Her prison, her new reality. Pressing her ear against the wall, she heard Dmitri's low voice speaking rapid Russian on the phone. The words drifted through, harsh, calculating. "Teach the Petrov bitch her place." A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, of something darker, something that recognized another predator's language. Outside her window, Moscow's night descended, cold, unforgiving, just like the man in the next room, just like her new life. The game had begun. The guard's rough hand shook her awake, harsh Russian consonants cutting through her dreams. "Gotovo. Breakfast for Pakan." Natasha's body ached from yesterday's chaos. The weight of her new reality pressed down. Prisoner, potential bride, pawn in a game she didn't understand. She pulled on a simple black dress Dmitri's staff had provided, her curves filling the fabric in ways that would have horrified her old life. The mansion's kitchen was a gleaming cathedral of stainless steel. An older woman with steel gray hair and kind eyes looked up from preparing elaborate pastries. "You must be Natasha," she said in a soft Russian accent. Her name was Marta, the head cook who had served the Volkov family for decades. Marta's weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her eyes held a warning. "Be careful with him," she murmured, sliding a tray of blini and caviar onto a silver serving platter. "Dmitri Volkov is not a man who accepts mistakes. One wrong move and—" She drew her finger across her throat in a sharp gesture. The private dining room was pure masculine power. Dark mahogany, crisp white linens, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens where men with guns patrolled like hunting dogs. Dmitri sat at the head of the table, his black tailored suit making him look like death dressed in Armani. "You're slow," he said, not looking up from his phone, words like gunshots. Natasha set down the tray, her hands surprisingly steady. She'd watched her father negotiate with dangerous men her entire life. She understood power, even if she'd never wielded it herself. Dmitri's eyes flickered up, scanning her, not with disgust, with something more dangerous. Hunger. "Eat," he commanded, pushing a second plate toward her. "I'm not—" "Eat," he repeated. No room for argument. The blini were perfect. Rich butter, delicate caviar. Natasha realized she was starving, not just for food, but for something else. Acknowledgement. Respect. By 10 a.m., she stood silently in Dmitri's study while he conducted business. Video calls in rapid Russian, conversations that shifted between business negotiations and death sentences. A man begged. Dmitri's voice was ice. "You stole from me. In this world, that means death." The call ended. The man would never be heard from again. At 2 p.m., everything changed. Dmitri walked into the garden, phone to his ear, discussing dinner reservations like he was planning a casual outing. 10 feet away, a man knelt in the pristine grass, bound, bleeding. "The veal will be fine," Dmitri said casually to someone. Then, without breaking conversational tone, he pulled a silver pistol and shot the kneeling man directly in the head. Blood sprayed, crimson against white roses. Natasha didn't scream. She didn't look away. Dmitri turned, met her eyes. "Anything else for the menu?" In that moment, Natasha understood. She wasn't just in danger. She was in a world where danger was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. By 6 p.m., something broke inside her. Survival instinct, desperation. She would not be a victim. Not again. The garden's perimeter looked vulnerable. Tall hedges, a momentary gap in the guard rotation. She could make it. She ran. 3 steps, 4. A hand like steel wrapped around her waist, pinned her against a stone wall. Dimitri's breath hot against her neck. "Did you really think," he whispered in Russian, "that I wasn't watching you? Every single moment?" The world contracted to his body, his heat, the promise of violence thrumming just beneath his skin. "You belong to me now," Dimitri said. Not a question, a statement of absolute fact. And Natasha, for the first time in her life, didn't know whether that terrified her or thrilled her. Chapter 5. Blood and Dinner. The cellar smelled like wet copper and fear. Natasha's hands shook as Dimitri's fingers gripped her chin, forcing her to watch. The man strapped to the chair wasn't begging anymore, he was whimpering. "Look," Dimitri commanded, his voice ice cold. "This is what happens to traitors." The accomplice had leaked information about a weapon shipment. Now he was paying the price. Dimitri moved with surgical precision, each cut calculated to cause maximum pain without killing. His tattoos, intricate black wolves dancing across muscled shoulders, shifted with each precise movement. Natasha wanted to look away, but Dimitri's grip was iron, his eyes boring into her. "You tried to escape today," he murmured. "Now you'll understand consequences." Water dripped somewhere. The man's ragged breathing echoed. Dimitri used a knife so sharp it almost looked clean, despite the blood. Each slice was methodical, almost clinical. Not rage, punishment. When it was over, he wiped the blade on a white cloth, turning to Natasha. "Do you understand now?" She nodded, her throat dry. This was no movie villain. This was real darkness, real power. By 8 p.m., everything changed. "Come," Dimitri said, his tone softer. "I want you to see something." Vera's room was nothing like the stark spaces Natasha expected. Soft pastels, art supplies scattered everywhere, books in multiple languages, a therapist's business card pinned to a corkboard. "She'll be taken care of," Dimitri said quietly. "I'm not a monster." Natasha studied him. Complex, dangerous, but not entirely without mercy. Dinner was a battlefield of another kind. White linen tablecloth, crystal glasses, silver cutlery that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Dimitri watched Natasha push food around her plate. "Eat," he commanded. "I'm not hungry." His laugh was dangerous. "You're going to eat every single bite." When she hesitated, he loaded her fork himself. Lean fingers, precise movements. "I don't want a skeleton," he growled. "I want a woman with curves, with strength." Something heated between them. Not just tension, something deeper. By 11 p.m., Natasha was drawing his bath. Steam rising, muscles rippling, tattoos telling stories of violence and survival. "Towel," he said. Not a request. Her hands trembled, handling the soft Egyptian cotton. She'd never been this close. Never seen a man like this. Dangerous, beautiful, terrifying. He caught her staring, didn't look away. "Something wrong?" A challenge in his voice. "No," she whispered. Later, in her room, shame and desire warred inside her. Her hand slipped between her legs, thinking of him. Stopping, starting, stopping again. Through the wall, she heard Dimitri, pacing, restless. 2 predators, trapped together, waiting. The night stretched endless, full of unspoken promises and dangerous possibilities. The morning light sliced through the heavy curtains, casting sharp shadows across Dimitri's marble kitchen. Natasha moved with practiced efficiency, her soft footsteps a stark contrast to the clinical precision of her movements. Steam rose from the silver coffee press, rich Russian blend, filling the air with its dark aroma. "Sit," Dimitri commanded, his voice a low rumble that didn't invite discussion. She settled across from him, back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her thick fingers brushed against the crisp linen tablecloth, a silent reminder of how different she was from the delicate bride he'd originally expected. "Tell me about Siberia," he said, not a request but a demand. Natasha met his eyes. Dark brown, fierce, no trace of submission, just raw intelligence. "Isolation was our education," she began. "Books were our world. Our mother died when we were 12. Cancer. After that, Vera and I only had each other." Dimitri watched her, something softening in his razor-sharp gaze. He'd expected a trembling girl. Instead, he got a woman who had survived impossible circumstances. By noon, she was seated beside him in his downtown Moscow office, a leather-bound notebook in her hands. Men in expensive suits spoke about shipping routes, money laundering, territories. Natasha didn't fidget. She listened, absorbed, her quick mind cataloging every detail. When Viktor Petrov was dragged in 3 hours later, the atmosphere changed. Cold. Dangerous. "You thought you could insult me." Dmitri's voice was silk over steel. "Send replacement daughters like cattle?" Viktor trembled. A broken man. Natasha's face remained impassive, but her hands clenched slightly. Betrayal ran deep, but blood ran deeper. Dinner was tense. Mikhail Volkov's arrival shattered any pretense of civility. "A fat cow," he muttered, looking directly at Natasha. "This is who will bear Volkov heirs." Dmitri's response was minimal. A warning glance, a slight shift in his posture, enough to make Mikhail shut up, but not enough to fully defend her. Later, in the study, everything changed. Dmitri sat surrounded by shadows, a half-empty vodka bottle beside him, a photograph clutched in his hand. His mother's face, young, beautiful, already marked by the violence that would consume her. "She wanted better," he mumbled, words slurring slightly. "Told me to be different, to break the cycle." Natasha watched, understanding something fundamental was happening. The monster was showing a glimpse of his humanity. "Instead, I became exactly what she feared," Dmitri continued. Then suddenly remembered himself. His vulnerability snapped shut like a steel trap. "Get out," he snarled, all tenderness vanished. "Now." She left, knowing she'd witnessed something profound, something no one else had ever seen. The night settled over the mansion like a heavy blanket. Outside, Moscow's criminal underbelly breathed and shifted. Inside, two people circled each other, a dangerous dance of power, desire, and unexpected connection. Dmitri poured another vodka, stared at his mother's photograph, remembered her last words. Be better, break the cycle. But some cycles, once started, are impossible to stop. Natasha, in her room, wrote in her journal, observations, details. She was collecting information, building her own understanding of this world she'd been thrust into. Not a victim, never a victim. A queen in training. The darkness of Moscow night pressed against the windows. Waiting, watching. The game was just beginning. The study reeked of vodka and despair when Natasha found Dmitri that morning. Pale morning light slanted across expensive mahogany, illuminating his massive frame crumpled beside an antique desk scattered with yellowed photographs. His suit jacket was rumpled, dark hair falling across his forehead, one hand still clutching an empty crystal tumbler. She moved silently, years of rural survival teaching her to be invisible. But there was nothing invisible about Dmitri Volkov, even unconscious. His presence dominated the room like a predator mid-hunt. Carefully, she draped a cashmere throw over his broad shoulders, her fingers accidentally brushing his jaw. The photographs caught her attention. A woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile, clearly Dmitri's mother. Forensic crime scene images surrounded her portrait. Blood, broken glass, a glimpse into the violence that shaped the man now sleeping before her. When Dmitri's eyes snapped open at precisely 10 a.m., his rage was immediate and volcanic. "You dare?" he growled, Russian rolling off his tongue like a threat. "Touch me, pity me." Natasha didn't flinch. "I covered you with a blanket, not wrote your biography." Her defiance seemed to both infuriate and intrigue him. He stood, towering over her, muscles coiled with controlled violence. "You're coming to the Bratva meeting, and you'll say nothing, understand?" The Bratva gathering was a testosterone-laden battlefield of expensive suits and barely concealed weapons. Older men with scarred hands and calculating eyes evaluated Dmitri, and by extension, Natasha, with open contempt. "Your replacement bride?" one elder sneered, looking her up and down. Not exactly what was promised, Volkov. Silence stretched. Natasha knew every eye was on her. And then, in perfect, razor-sharp Russian, she responded. "Interesting how men who've never risked anything critique those who risk everything. My husband's honor isn't determined by my body, but by the blood he's willing to shed, protecting what's his." The room went dead silent. Dmitri's expression was unreadable, a mix of fury, shock, and something darker. Desire, respect. By 4 p.m., private tension crackled between them like electrical current. His punishment was exquisite psychological torture. "Towels," he commanded, stepping into the massive marble shower. Steam billowed. Water cascaded over muscles carved from granite and violence. Natasha's job: hand him towels. Not touch, not look away. Pure, controlled torment. Her breath caught watching droplets trace his body. Hard plains, scars telling stories of battles survived. When he turned, deliberately slow, she saw the raw, animalistic hunger in his eyes. Dinner was a quiet affair of unspoken tension. He asked about her virginity with clinical detachment that felt like anything but clinical. "You've truly never been touched." "Our culture," she said simply. "A woman's virtue matters." By 11 p.m., he sent her to bed, but he remained outside her door, a predator wrestling with his most primal instincts, wanting, waiting, deciding. The night stretched between them, a landscape of unexplored desires, dangerous promises, and the thin line between protection and possession. Outside her door, Dmitry Volkov made a choice, not with his mind, not with his empire's expectations, but with something far more dangerous: his heart. The phone's shrill ring shattered the pre-dawn silence. Dmitry's hand moved with predatory speed, fingers closing around the device before the second ring finished. "Speak!" His voice was ice, commanding. The encrypted line crackled. Ivan's voice tight with tension. "Lorenzo's made contact. Cosa Nostra is moving." By 8 a.m., the mansion transformed. Security teams moved like shadows, checking every entrance, window, and potential breach point. Natasha watched from the library doorway, her body tense but not cowering. Her gaze tracked Dmitry's movements, not with fear for herself, but with a fierce protectiveness that surprised him. He caught her watching. Their eyes locked. Something passed between them, a recognition of mutual danger, of shared survival instinct. At noon, the package arrived. White courier envelope, clean, pristine, except for the contents that made Dmitry's world tilt. Vera's university ID, splattered with rust-brown stains that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Alongside it, a stack of surveillance photos, Natasha captured from impossible angles. Sniper positions, rooftop views, street corners, her walking, her sleeping, her breathing. Lorenzo's message was crystal clear. "I see everything. You are vulnerable." The Bratva Council meeting at 3 p.m. felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. Uncle Mikhail's voice dripped with cold calculation. "Eliminate the sisters. Remove the weakness." Dmitry's response was a low, dangerous growl that made grown men flinch. "No one touches them." By 6 p.m., he pulled Natasha into his private study. Her eyes were wide, but not with personal terror. She was scanning his face, searching for signs of threat to her sister. "Vera is safe," he said, almost involuntarily. "I protect what's mine." The words hung between them, a promise, a threat, a declaration. At 9 p.m., he made the decision. She would sleep in his bed, not as a lover, as a protected asset, as something precious. Midnight found them rigid on opposite sides of his massive bed. King-sized, yet they might as well have been inches apart. Every breath calculated, every movement controlled. Natasha lay perfectly still, her mind racing. She could feel the heat radiating from Dmitry's body, the dangerous tension, the unspoken promise of violence waiting just beneath the surface. Dmitry remained motionless, listening to her breathing, to the house's subtle sounds, to potential threats. His hand remained inches from the weapon concealed beneath his pillow. Outside, Moscow's night breathed cold and dark. Somewhere in the city, Lorenzo was planning. Somewhere, threats were gathering. But here, in this moment, they were a fortress. Two predators, waiting. The next week would change everything, and they both knew it. Chapter 9. Blood and Belonging. The nightmare came sharp and sudden. Vera's scream pierced through the darkness, her body broken and bleeding. Natasha jolted upright, her heart racing, a strangled cry trapped in her throat. Before she could fully awaken, strong arms pulled her against a solid chest. Dmitry's body was warm, radiating heat and security. His hand pressed against the back of her neck, fingers splayed wide, not restraining but grounding her. "You're safe," he murmured in Russian. "Breathe." She breathed. In, out. The scent of expensive cologne and something darker, gunpowder and leather, surrounded her. Dmitry didn't ask about the nightmare. He understood that some terrors didn't need explaining. When dawn broke, they were still tangled together. her curves pressed against his muscular frame, his morning arousal evident. Neither moved, neither seemed embarrassed. "You'll come with me today," Dmitri announced, his tone brooking no argument. "Everywhere, as my woman." The words should have felt like a cage. Instead, they felt like protection. By 10 a.m., they were shopping. Not the timid, modest shopping Natasha expected. Dmitri selected dresses that hugged every curve, deep jewel-toned fabrics that made her skin glow. When she reached for a black, loose-fitting dress, he intercepted her hand. "No," he said simply. "These." The dresses were scandalous. Emerald green silk that clung like a second skin, ruby red with a plunging neckline, midnight blue that emphasized every soft curve of her body. "I don't," she started. "You're beautiful," Dmitri interrupted, "and you'll look like you belong to me." At the Bratva-owned restaurant, belonging took on a new meaning. Dmitri seated her directly on his lap, his hand possessive on her waist. Other crime lords watched, some with appreciation, some with calculated judgment. Natasha fed him small bites of food, her hand trembling slightly. Each movement was a performance, each touch a declaration. "Relax," Dmitri whispered in her ear. "They're watching you become mine." The club that evening was another battlefield. Dimly lit, expensive, dangerous. Natasha felt every eye on her, some lustful, some predatory. Dmitri's hand never left her lower back, a brand of ownership. The attack happened fast. 3 men, Lorenzo's soldiers, emerging from shadows with calculated precision, guns drawn, eyes cold. Dmitri moved like liquid violence. His first punch shattered a man's jaw, the second crushed a windpipe. By the third kill, blood spattered his pristine white shirt, but his eyes never left Natasha's. She watched, not cowering, not turning away. When the last body dropped, silence rang louder than gunshots. "This is who I am," Dmitri said, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his knuckles. "A monster who would burn the world for you." Most women would have run. Natasha stepped closer, touched his bloodied hand. "Show me," she whispered. By 1 a.m., they were home. Dmitri's shirt was a canvas of violence, red and white and terrifyingly beautiful. He didn't hide. He didn't apologize. Natasha understood then. This was love in the Bratva. Not soft, not gentle, but absolute. Possession, protection, power. When he pulled her against him that night, she didn't resist. She belonged, not just to him, but with him, the monster, and the woman who matched his darkness. Here's the raw text for Chapter 10. The morning light sliced through Dmitri's bedroom like a knife, casting sharp shadows across his muscular frame. Blood seeped through the bandage on his shoulder from last night's fight, dark crimson against pale skin. Natasha's hands were gentle, too gentle, as she cleaned the wound. "Stop looking at me like that," Dmitri growled, his voice rough with barely contained tension. Her fingers trembled slightly. "Like what? Like I'm something breakable, like I'm something to be saved." The antiseptic burned against his skin. Natasha pressed harder than necessary, and Dmitri knew it was intentional. A test, a challenge. Her eyes met his, dark, fierce, unafraid. No one looked at him like that. Not ever. Something inside him snapped. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her closer. One moment of stillness, then his mouth crashed into hers. Brutal, possessive, hungry. Not a kiss, a claim. Natasha didn't shrink. She matched him, her curves pressing against his hard body, her fingers threading through his hair. For 3 breathless moments, the world disappeared. Then Dmitri pulled back, breathing hard. "No," he whispered against her lips. "Not yet." The rule, his damn rule about purity, about waiting. Noon brought Vera's supervised visit. She looked different, softer, calmer. The therapy was working. Art supplies were scattered across the table, watercolors bleeding into each other like bruises. Natasha watched her sister sketch, relief washing through her. At least here, Vera was safe. By 3 p.m., Dmitri had Natasha pinned against the training room mirror. Again, he commanded, "Show me how you'd break free." His body was a wall of muscle against her. Each lesson felt more like foreplay than self-defense. When she tried to knee his groin, he caught her leg, hiking it around his waist. For a moment, they both stopped breathing. The Bratva dinner was a battlefield of a different kind. Wives with razor-sharp smiles and designer dresses looked Natasha up and down. Their eyes were weapons, calculating her weight, her worth. Dmitri saw everything. When dessert arrived, an elegant chocolate torte, he did something unexpected. "Feed me," he ordered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Shock rippled through the room. Natasha's hand shook slightly as she lifted a bite to his lips. He caught her wrist, sucking the chocolate from her fingers, slowly, deliberately. The message was clear. She was his, completely. By 10 p.m., they were alone in his bedroom. "Undress," Dmitri commanded. Not a request. Natasha stripped to her underwear, black lace that both concealed and revealed. Dmitri's eyes burned. His hands mapped her body like a conquering territory, worshipping, praising. In Russian, he whispered words that sounded like prayers and promises, but always, always above the waist. "You're driving me insane," he muttered at 2 a.m., frustration vibrating through every word. Natasha was sent to the bathroom to sleep. Alone. Again. Outside, Moscow's night hummed with dangerous potential. Inside the mansion, two people burned with unspoken desires, separated by rules, tradition, and a razor-thin line between control and complete surrender. Dmitri stared at the closed bathroom door. Natasha listened to his restless movements. Neither slept. Both wanted. Chapter 11. Blood and Loyalty. The mansion's marble floors echoed with Dmitri's heavy footsteps at 7 a.m., cold and distant after last night's near-catastrophic moment of vulnerability. Natasha watched him from across the breakfast table, her fingers wrapped around a delicate porcelain teacup, knowing something had shifted between them. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray brioni, pressed so sharply it could slice glass. But his eyes? Those told a different story. Haunted, hungry, dangerous. By 10 a.m., they were seated in Dmitri's private conference room with 3 arms dealers from the Balkans. Natasha wasn't just decoration. She observed everything, her peripheral vision catching a subtle movement. Sergei, one of Dmitri's longest-serving lieutenants, was texting under the table, his fingers moving with a nervous energy that screamed wrong. She brushed her finger against Dmitri's wrist. Their touch code, developed over days of forced proximity. 1 tap. Something's off. 2 taps. Immediate danger. Her single tap made his eyes flicker momentarily in her direction. The meeting continued. Contracts discussing weapons shipments through Eastern European corridors. Millions of dollars on the line. But Dmitri's focus had shifted. His attention split between the negotiations and the rat in his midst. After the dealers left, Dmitri's calm was terrifying. "Sergei, my office, now." 2 hours later, the interrogation room told a brutal story. Natasha watched, not turning away. Blood splattered the white tiles. Sergei had been feeding information to Lorenzo, compromising entire Bratva networks for what he claimed was protection money. Dmitri didn't scream, didn't lose control. His violence was surgical, precise. Each cut, each question extracted with clinical efficiency. Natasha understood this wasn't just punishment. This was preservation. Every piece of information meant protecting what was his. When it was over, Sergei was barely recognizable. Dmitri wiped his hands, turned to Natasha. "You didn't flinch." "This is your world," she responded simply. "I'm learning." At 5 p.m., something unexpected happened. Instead of more violence, Dmitri took her to a private art gallery he owned. Soft lighting illuminated paintings, mostly Russian masters, landscapes that spoke of both beauty and melancholy. "My mother loved art," he said quietly, something vulnerable threading through his voice. She believed beauty could exist even in darkness. Natasha watched him, seeing beyond the monster. Here was a man shaped by violence, yet yearning for something more refined, something softer. By 8 p.m., they were having dinner, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, a meal that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Natasha, wearing a deep burgundy dress that hugged her curves, asked the question burning between them. "Why am I really here, Dmitri? Why haven't you sent me away?" His fork stopped midair. For a moment, the mask slipped. Pure, raw honesty emerged. "Because you make me feel human again," he whispered. "Because when I look at you, I see something beyond blood and contracts. Something alive." The Russian music started at midnight. Old, melancholic notes filling the grand ballroom. Dmitri pulled her close. Not with aggression. With something softer. Possessive but tender. His lips brushed her ear. "You're mine, Natasha. Even if I never touch you, you're mine forever." And in that moment, surrounded by shadows and history, they danced. Two souls finding connection in the most unexpected place. Between violence and vulnerability, between what was promised and what was chosen. The gym smelled like testosterone and discipline. Natasha watched, transfixed, as Dmitri lifted massive weights, his back a landscape of muscle and scars. Sweat traced intricate paths down his spine, each droplet telling a story of control and raw power. "Are you going to stare or help?" His voice was gravel, barely breaking his rhythm. She stepped forward, uncertain. He nodded toward the bench. "Spot me." Her hands, trembling slightly, positioned themselves beneath the barbell. Close. Too close. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the mix of iron and something distinctly male. "Don't let me die," he murmured, then began pressing massive weights with mechanical precision. Her arms tensed, ready. But Dmitri didn't need help. He was pure machine, pure muscle, pure controlled violence. By 11 a.m., everything changed. Alexei stumbled in drunk, loud, obnoxious. His laughter cut through the mansion's silence like a knife. "Still saving yourself like a blushing bride cousin," he sneered. 5 years waiting for a woman who never came. The great Dmitri Volkov, Virgin Pakan. The room went cold. Dmitri's muscles coiled like steel cables. But he said nothing. Alexei continued, relentless. "Everyone knows. The most feared man in Moscow, and you've never touched a woman. What kind of man are you?" Natasha watched horror and humiliation war in Dmitri's eyes. Something protective surged inside her. By 2 p.m., she couldn't stand it anymore. "Tell me the truth," she demanded, cornering him in his study. Dmitri's fist struck the marble wall so hard the entire room seemed to tremble. Plaster cracked. Blood dripped from his knuckles. "My mother," he whispered, and for the first time she saw vulnerability crack his iron facade. The story poured out. His mother brutalized before her murder, her dying wish that he be different, that he honor women, that he break the cycle of violence that consumed their family. "I promised her," Dmitri said, voice breaking. "I promised I wouldn't be like them, the men who treat women like objects, like disposable things." Natasha stepped closer. Her hand, surprisingly gentle, touched his bleeding knuckles. By 5 p.m., something shifted between them. Not sexual, something deeper. A recognition. 2 damaged souls seeing each other completely. During dinner, she made her stance clear. "Your choice isn't weakness," she told him. "It's the most powerful thing I've ever heard." Dmitri stared, something like wonder crossing his face. At 11 p.m., he pulled her into his bed, fully clothed, just holding her. "You're the first person to see me," he whispered in Russian. "Really see me, and not run." His arms were steel around her, protective, possessive. But for the first time, she didn't feel trapped. She felt safe. Outside, Moscow's night pulsed with danger. Inside this room, something fragile and precious was being born. A connection neither of them expected. A love neither of them believed they deserved. Dmitri's breath was steady against her neck. His body, always coiled with potential violence, now soft with something approaching peace. Natasha understood then. True power wasn't about breaking, it was about holding something, someone, without destroying them. And in that moment, wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man in Eastern Europe, she realized she was home. Chapter 13. Broken Promises and Naked Truths. The nightmare came like it always did. Blood. Her screams, the sound of breaking glass. Dmitri thrashed against invisible attackers, his muscular body drenched in cold sweat, Russian curses ripping from his throat. "Dmitri." Soft hands pressed against his shoulders. "Wake up. You're safe." His eyes snapped open, pupils dilated and dangerous. For a moment, Natasha thought he might strike her, but something in her steady gaze anchored him back to reality. She didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. "Another dream about your mother," she stated, not a question. He rolled away, exposing his back, a map of old scars that told stories of violence and survival. Natasha knew better than to touch those marks without permission. The Bratva didn't show weakness, and Dmitri Volkov was the embodiment of that. Unwritten rule. At dawn, he led her to a room she'd never seen before. Locked behind 3 separate security systems, the space felt like a shrine. Photographs, preserved clothing, children's drawings, all meticulously maintained. His mother's sanctuary, untouched for years. "She loved sunflowers," Dmitri said quietly, touching a faded painting. "Before everything, she would sing while gardening, Russian folk songs. I was her entire world." Natasha listened. This wasn't just a story. This was a confession. A man like Dmitri didn't share vulnerability. He conquered it. The morning shattered when his lieutenant burst in with news. Victor had contacted Lorenzo, offering Natasha as a bargaining chip for his own survival. The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees with Dmitri's rage. "I'll kill him," Dmitri growled, reaching for his phone to order an execution. Natasha's hand stopped him, not with weakness, with calculated precision. "No," she said. "I want to look him in the eyes when I destroy him." By noon, they were in a stark interrogation room. Victor looked smaller than Natasha remembered. Broken, desperate. "You're dead to me," she said, her voice clinical and cold. "Dmitri has been more of a father to Vera in 10 days than you've been in 22 years. Victor stuttered, pleaded. Natasha was unmoved. Dmitri watched, fascinated. This wasn't the cowering girl who arrived weeks ago. This was a queen finding her throne. That afternoon, he took her to his private beach. Isolated, secured. Waves crashed against rocky shores like a metaphor for their tumultuous connection. "You're extraordinary," he murmured, watching her silhouette against the setting sun. When darkness fell, vulnerability crept between them like the tide. "I'm falling in love with you," Dmitri admitted. Raw, unfiltered. Natasha turned. Her curves caught the moonlight. "I know," she whispered. "I'm falling too." By 10, they were tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets. Dmitri's hands mapped her body like uncharted territory. "Tomorrow," he breathed against her neck. "I'll make you mine completely. Some promises are meant to be broken." His virgin vow, his last pure thing, sacrificed at the altar of their dangerous love. Outside, Moscow's shadows watched. The Bratva waited, but inside this moment, only they existed. Two souls discovering that darkness could also be home. The first rays of dawn crept through thick velvet curtains, casting a golden shimmer across Dmitri's massive bedroom. Natasha stirred, her body still aching from the anticipation that had been building for days. Dmitri moved with predatory grace, lifting a silver tray laden with crystal champagne flutes and a bowl of ripe strawberries. "Eat," he commanded softly, his fingers delicately feeding her the first strawberry. The juice ran down her chin, and he caught it with his thumb, bringing it to his lips. His eyes never left hers, dark, intense, hungry. The champagne was crisp and cold, bubbling, against her tongue. Dmitri watched her with an intensity that made her skin flush. At precisely 10 a.m., he dismissed every staff member. The mansion went silent. No guards, no servants, just them. "Today," he said, his Russian accent thick with emotion, "you will understand what it means to be mine." He undressed her slowly, reverently. Not with the brutal efficiency she'd seen in his business dealings, but with a tenderness that seemed almost impossible for a man like him. His hands traced every curve, every stretch mark, every part of her body that society had told her was undesirable. "Beautiful," he whispered. "Perfectly beautiful." When he first entered her, the world seemed to stop. Dmitri was true to his word. He was a virgin, and he was determined to worship her completely. He took his time, ensuring her pleasure came first, second, third. His control was superhuman, bringing her to the edge repeatedly before finally claiming her fully. "Mine," he growled. "Only mine." By 3 in the afternoon, their dynamics had shifted. Natasha, emboldened by their earlier intimacy, pushed Dmitri onto his back. She rode him with a confidence that surprised them both, her hands pinning his shoulders, her body taking what it wanted. Dmitri's praise came in breathless Russian. "Bozhe moi, my God," he repeated, his hands gripping her hips, helping her find her rhythm. This wasn't just sex. This was a claiming, a transformation. As evening approached, their passion softened into something deeper. Dmitri traced her stretch marks, his fingers light as feathers. "Tiger stripes," he murmured. "Marks of a warrior, marks of survival." Dinner was served in bed, champagne, caviar, but the real feast was each other. Dmitri spoke of plans, making her his wife, his Bratva queen, not just a decorative partner, but a true equal. "You will stand beside me," he said. "Not behind me, not in front, beside me." Near midnight, they made love against the window. Moscow's lights spread beneath them like a constellation of possibilities. Dmitri pressed against her back, his breath hot on her neck. "You own me now, Natasha," he whispered. "Body and soul." In that moment, everything changed. A crime lord's heart, long believed to be made of stone, shattered, and reconstructed itself around her. A woman society had deemed unworthy became the most powerful force in his world. Their bodies moved together, a dance of redemption, of passion, of a love that defied every expectation. Outside, Moscow watched, the city of secrets, the city of shadows. And inside this fortress of a bedroom, two souls, who were never supposed to find each other, discovered something more powerful than blood, more dangerous than any crime family. They discovered each other. The morning shattered like thin glass, fragments of peace cutting through the warm afterglow of intimacy. At exactly 8:07 a.m., Dmitri's secure phone erupted with an urgent ring that made Natasha's heart skip. His naked body tensed. Beside her, muscles coiling like steel cables. One hand reached for the phone while the other instinctively pulled her closer, protecting her even in potential danger. The blood on his knuckles from their previous night's passion hadn't fully dried. "They killed Anatoly!" Dmitri growled, his voice a dangerous Russian rumble that vibrated through her body. Anatoly was one of his most trusted lieutenants, a man who'd been with the Bratva for decades. His death wasn't just a loss, it was a direct challenge. Lorenzo's message was clear. This was war. By 10 a.m., they were in Dmitri's armored SUV, heading to the emergency Bratva meeting. Protocol demanded he attend alone, but Dmitri refused to leave Natasha unprotected. She sat beside him, wearing a fitted black dress that hugged her curves, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She wasn't just coming for protection. She was making a statement. The Bratva meeting hall was a monument to old-world power, mahogany panels, crystal chandeliers, and men who could kill you with a look. When they entered, the room went silent. Natasha felt their eyes, some curious, some contemptuous, all assessing her. Mikhail, Dmitri's uncle, didn't even try to hide his disgust. "You bring your woman to a sacred meeting?" he sneered, emphasizing woman like it was an insult. Dmitri's hand found Natasha's under the table, squeezing once. A signal. Don't react. But Natasha wasn't built for silence. "Perhaps the Pakhan believes in transparency," she said smoothly in perfect Russian, her tone crisp and controlled. "Or perhaps he knows his woman is more strategic than half the men in this room." A few chuckles broke the tension. Mikhail's face reddened. The meeting devolved into a power struggle. Lorenzo's attack wasn't just about killing Anatoly, it was about exposing weakness in the Volkov organization. Mikhail repeatedly questioned Dmitri's judgment, suggesting his obsession with Natasha was compromising the family's interests. "You're choosing pussy over power," Mikhail spat during a heated exchange. Dmitri's hand moved so fast nobody saw it. Suddenly, Mikhail was pressed against the wall, Dmitri's forearm crushing his throat. The room went dead silent. But Natasha intervened. "Mikhail wants to discuss weakness," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Let's discuss how he lost 3 shipments last quarter. Let's discuss his connection to the Albanian syndicate." The room shifted. Mikhail's attack on Dmitri transformed into his own potential exposure. Brilliant political maneuvering. Dmitri released Mikhail, turning to his men with a cold smile. "Any other concerns?" The meeting concluded with Dmitri's authority unchallenged. At 3 p.m., he made it official. He would formally announce their engagement next week, a power move that solidified Natasha's position. By 6 p.m., Vera arrived to celebrate. She seemed happy for Natasha, but something felt off. Natasha watched her sister closely during dinner, noticing how Vera's hands trembled slightly, how her eyes darted to her phone. At 10 p.m., Natasha cornered Vera privately. Tears streamed down her sister's face as she confessed. Their father, Victor, had been messaging her, manipulating her with guilt, suggesting Natasha was using her, controlling her. "He says Dmitri will destroy us," Vera whispered, "that I'm the only family who truly loves me." Natasha's heart broke and hardened simultaneously. She decided, for now, not to tell Dmitri. She wouldn't have Vera punished. Not yet. At midnight, as Dmitri slept beside her, Natasha stared into darkness. She knew the secret would become a powder keg, but for now she would protect her sister, unaware that her silence would soon explode into complete catastrophe. The ballroom gleamed like polished ice, crystal chandeliers casting soft light on 500 of the most dangerous men in Eastern Europe. Natasha stood beside Dmitri, her hand trembling slightly as he slipped his mother's diamond ring onto her finger. The weight of generations pressed against her skin, not just the ring, but the expectations of an entire criminal empire. "Breathe," Dmitri murmured in Russian, his lips barely moving. "You belong here." She did, despite the whispers, despite the calculating eyes that swept over her curves, expecting weakness. Her white Valentino gown hugged every inch of her body, a statement of defiance. She wasn't hiding anymore. The Bratva guests arrived in tailored suits that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Each family head kissed her hand with forced politeness, testing her resolve. Natasha met every gaze without flinching. Dimitri's hand rested possessively at her lower back, a silent warning. Touch her, and you touch me. Noon passed. The ceremony preparations hummed with tension. Vera stood quietly in the corner, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Something felt off, but Natasha was too focused on Dimitri to notice her sister's increasing anxiety. At 3 p.m., the first speeches began. Dimitri's voice was low, dangerous velvet, as he spoke about tradition, about legacy, about how Natasha wasn't just his wife, she was his equal. The room went silent. No one expected such a declaration. Vera excused herself to the bathroom at 4 p.m. No one watched her go. The attack came suddenly. First, a muffled explosion that shook the marble floors. Then another. Smoke billowed through ornate windows. Screams erupted. Gunfire erupted like a sudden storm. "Natasha!" Dimitri's voice was a razor's edge. "Stay behind me!" But she was already moving. Years of watching Dimitri had taught her survival wasn't about waiting. It was about acting. She grabbed a hidden knife from her wedding garter, eyes scanning the chaos. Lorenzo's men poured through breached walls. Professional, coordinated. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated destruction. Dimitri fought like a demon unleashed. Each movement was precision, brutality. Transformed into art. Bodies dropped around him. But for every man he killed, 2 more appeared. "Mikhail!" Dimitri roared, recognizing his uncle's silhouette in the smoke. "What have you done?" Mikhail's laugh was cold. "Protecting the Bratva from your weakness. A man who chooses a woman over his family doesn't deserve to lead." The bullet struck Dimitri's shoulder. He didn't even flinch, continuing to fight. But Natasha saw the blood, the weakness. "No," she whispered. Strong hands grabbed her, Lorenzo's men. She fought like a wildcat, her knife finding flesh, but there were too many. As Dimitri fell, bleeding but still fighting, their eyes met. Rage, promise, love, then darkness. When Natasha woke, she was in motion. The smell of leather, machine oil, foreign air, an Italian dialect murmured nearby. She was being transported, kidnapped. Her last image burned into her memory. Dimitri, falling, bleeding. The building burning behind him. They thought they had broken her. They were wrong. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Natasha's face. They had no idea what was coming. The game was just beginning. The sunlight pierced through the ornate, iron-barred windows, casting intricate shadows across the marble floor of her luxurious prison cell. Natasha Petrov stirred, her body aching from yesterday's psychological torment. She knew exactly where she was, Lorenzo Ricci's compound in the rolling hills of Tuscany, a golden prison designed to break her spirit. She stretched, her curves moving beneath the silk nightgown they'd dressed her in, a subtle reminder that even in captivity, they wanted to maintain some twisted appearance of civility. Her mind, however, was anything but passive. Each moment was a calculation, every breath a potential strategy. At precisely 2 p.m, Lorenzo entered. His tailored Armani suit contrasted sharply with the cold malevolence in his eyes. "Good afternoon, Ms. Petrov," he said, his Italian accent thick with manufactured politeness. Natasha didn't flinch. She'd learned from Dimitri that showing weakness was never an option. "You're wondering why I haven't violated you," Lorenzo continued, pouring himself a glass of red wine. "This isn't about your body. This is about destroying Dimitri's spirit." He placed a tablet in front of her. Fabricated news reports showed graphic images suggesting Dimitri's death. Bloody crime scene photos, headlines screaming about a Bratva leader assassinated. Each image was meticulously designed to crush her hope, her breath caught, not from grief, but from calculating the fabrication's details. Dimitri had taught her to always look beneath the surface. At 4 p.m, they chained her for a video message. Bright lights, multiple cameras. Lorenzo wanted performance, wanted brokenness. What he didn't know was that Natasha was mapping every inch of the room, studying guard rotations, identifying potential escape routes. "Please," she said into the camera, her voice deliberately, trembling. "Help me." But beneath the theatrical plea, her eyes were cold, strategic. Each whimper was calculated, each tear manufactured. By 6 p.m, Lorenzo force-fed her, insisting she remain healthy for future plans. His hands were surprisingly gentle, his touch clinical. "You need nutrition," he explained. "Can't have you weakening before the main event." The evening brought unexpected intelligence. A sympathetic guard, Miguel, mentioned his daughter had once been saved by Dimitri during a trafficking intervention. Small conversations revealed compound layouts, guard shift changes, security protocols. "Your husband is a monster," Miguel said, not unkindly. "But sometimes monsters protect what others cannot." By 10 p.m., alone in her room, Natasha began serious reconnaissance. She tested her chains methodically, finding microscopic weaknesses. Her fingers, calloused from years of rural survival, worked with precision. Dimitri's tactical lessons played in her mind like a strategic soundtrack. "Always find the weakness," he'd told her. "Every system has a break point." She worked quietly, systematically. Her body might look soft, but her mind was a razor's edge. Each movement calculated, each breath controlled. Through hidden cameras, Lorenzo watched, amused, believing her attempts futile. What he didn't know, Natasha Petrov was nobody's victim, not anymore. Miles away, in a sterile medical facility, Dimitri lay unconscious. His brother even watched, a mountain of controlled fury. Machines beeped. Monitors tracked his healing progress. The Volkov brothers weren't finished. Not by a long shot. Natasha's fingers found a microscopic weakness in her restraints. A tiny, almost imperceptible, structural flaw. She smiled, not the smile of a victim, the smile of a queen preparing her revenge. Game. Set. Almost. Match. Chapter 18. Survival and Strategy. The sterile white walls of Ivan's secret medical facility felt like a cage. Dimitri's breath came in ragged gasps, each movement sending sharp pain through his wounded body. At 6 a.m., he tore the IV from his arm, his eyes burning with a fury that made even his battle-hardened brother take a step back. "Where is she?" Dimitri's voice was a razor-sharp whisper, barely contained rage vibrating beneath each word. Ivan's hand pressed him back onto the bed. "You'll bleed out if you move. The wound." "I don't care about the wound," Dimitri snarled. "I care about Natasha." By 9 a.m., the video arrived. Lorenzo's calculated psychological warfare. Natasha in chains, her face bruised, but her eyes... God. Her eyes still blazed with defiance. When a guard approached her in the video, she spat directly at the camera. Dimitri's roar of rage tore open his fresh stitches, blood seeping through the pristine bandages. Ivan cursed, pressing towels against the wound. "Control yourself, brother. This is exactly what Lorenzo wants." At noon, Mikhail arrived with half the Bratva Council. Their expensive suits looked almost comical against the clinical medical setting. The lead council member, Yuri Volkov, stepped forward with cold calculation. "You must step down," Yuri said. "Choose the Bratva over this... girl." The word girl held so much contempt that something primal shifted in Dimitri's eyes. In one fluid motion, despite his injuries, he drew a hidden knife and plunged it into Yuri's throat. Blood sprayed across the white walls, a stark reminder of Dimitri's true nature. "Anyone else want to discuss my woman?" he asked, his voice calm, despite the arterial spray decorating his hospital gown. The remaining council members took an involuntary step back. At 3 p.m., Vera was discovered. Catatonic, wrapped in a hospital blanket, her eyes vacant with guilt. The trauma of her betrayal and subsequent kidnapping had shattered something inside her. Dimitri's hand, surprisingly gentle, brushed her cheek. "She needs protection," he murmured to Ivan. "When this is over..." By 5 p.m., Viktor Petrov was dragged in, chains binding his wrists. The man who had attempted to sell his own daughters looked significantly less confident now. Dimitri's interrogation was surgical. No wasted movements, no unnecessary brutality. Just cold, precise questioning that stripped away every layer of Viktor's defenses. "Lorenzo's location," Dimitri repeated. Each word was a blade. Viktor broke within 30 minutes, providing detailed information about Lorenzo's compound in southern Italy. His motivation was pure survival, a last-ditch effort to save his own miserable life. At 7 p.m., Dimitri made his final offer. "Help me save Natasha, and your death will be quick. Refuse, and you'll pray for death long before it comes." By 9 p.m., rescue plans were meticulously drafted. Ivan's military connections, Dimitri's Bratva network, and the few truly loyal soldiers they could trust, all resources were consolidated. Every detail was planned with the precision of a military operation. Midnight found Dmitri in a dangerous dance with survival. Ignoring medical advice, he injected himself with a cocktail of stimulants, drugs that would keep him functional, but would likely destroy his body in the process. The medical monitors beside him went wild, tracking his increasingly erratic vital signs. Little did Lorenzo know Natasha was already making her own moves. In her section of the compound, she had been studying her guards, watching, waiting. When the moment presented itself, she palmed a small knife, hidden during a moment of carelessness by one of her captors. Her strategy was forming, each movement calculated. She wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was preparing to rescue herself. Dmitri might be coming, but Natasha Petrov was no damsel. She was a queen preparing for war. The night stretched before them, a canvas of violence, strategy, and desperate love. Somewhere between Moscow and southern Italy, two predators were about to collide, and nothing would ever be the same. The first rays of dawn cracked, like gunfire through the Italian compound's grimy windows. Dmitri's boots hit the ground with calculated precision, each step a promise of vengeance. His team moved like shadows, silent, deadly, with machine-like efficiency. 400 miles away, Natasha's fingers worked the hidden knife against her chains. She'd watched, learned, calculated. Guard shift change was her window. 3 minutes, 2, 1. The metal link snapped. Freedom tasted like blood and gunpowder. Her first kill came swiftly. The guard who tried stopping her escape crumpled, never seeing her move. One thrust, clean, precise. She wiped the blade on his uniform, her breath steady. Dmitri would be proud. Chaos erupted quickly. Fires sparked in strategic points. Prisoners, trafficked women, broken souls, found unexpected liberation. Natasha moved like liquid mercury, setting her plan in motion. Lorenzo thought he knew control. He knew nothing. By 8 a.m., she'd been recaptured, but the compound burned around them, her strategic fires creating perfect distraction. Lorenzo's men ran frantically, trying to contain the spreading flames and unexpected uprising. When Lorenzo himself arrived, rage twisting his features, Natasha simply laughed. "He's coming," she said, blood and soot streaking her face. "And God help you when he arrives." Her confidence wasn't bravado, it was promise. Simultaneously, Dmitri sat across from Italian crime families who despised Lorenzo, not begging, negotiating, each word calculated, each gesture a weapon more dangerous than any gun. By 10 a.m., alliances shifted. By noon, war was inevitable. The compound assault looked less like a military operation and more like biblical judgment. Dmitri became death incarnate, moving through enemies like a ghost, leaving only blood and broken bodies in his wake. Each kill was surgical. Each step brought him closer to Natasha. When he finally found her, she stood over Lorenzo's second in command. Bloody knife, bloody hands, magnificent. Their reunion was primal. He crushed her against him, kiss consuming everything, pain, rage, desire, redemption. When they broke apart, she met his eyes with fierce declaration. "I'm not a princess waiting to be rescued," Natasha growled. "I'm your queen." Dmitri's smile was pure razor's edge. "My queen, indeed." Together, they moved through the compound, two predators in perfect lethal synchronization. Where he was brutal strength, she was calculated strategy. Where he broke bodies, she dismantled systems. They weren't just lovers, they were a weapon. Lorenzo's compound transformed into their battlefield. Each room became a statement of their power. Each fallen enemy a testament to their bond. No traditional rescue, no damsel, just two dangerous souls finding each other in darkness. By 3 p.m., smoke rising behind them, they stood victorious. Not just survivors, conquerors. Natasha's hand found Dmitri's, blood and gunpowder, their wedding rings. They'd rewritten every rule, destroyed every expectation, created something new from the ashes of their old worlds. "We're not done," she whispered. Dmitri's laugh was dark promise. "We're just beginning." The compound burned. Their legend was just being written. The corridor echoed with gunfire and chaos. Dmitri's grip on Natasha's hand was iron, pulling her forward through the smoke-filled hallway of Lorenzo's compound. Blood and broken glass crunched beneath their boots. "Vera," Natasha whispered, her voice raw with panic. Lorenzo's voice crackled through the intercom system. "Choose, Volkov. Which sister lives?" Dmitri's jaw clenched. He stopped, turning Natasha to face him. His hands gripped her shoulders, blocking out the world's noise. "Listen to me! We stay focused! Vera survives! Do you understand?" Her eyes burned with a mix of terror and determination. She nodded once, hard. They moved again. Natasha's body was tense, wound tight like a weapon ready to be unleashed. Dmitri recognized that energy, the protective fury that made her dangerous, not a victim, never a victim. At precisely 4 p.m., they reached Lorenzo's sanctum. The room was a study in controlled luxury. Mahogany shelves, expensive art, and Vera sitting terrified in the center, a knife pressed against her throat by Lorenzo. "One more step," Lorenzo growled, "and she dies." Vera looked small, fragile. But something had changed in her eyes. Months of therapy, of watching her sister, of surviving, they'd transformed her. Lorenzo didn't see it coming. When Vera moved, she moved fast. Hidden scissors, her art supplies, plunged into Lorenzo's wrist. The knife clattered. Blood sprayed. Lorenzo's scream was pure rage. He fired, catching Vera in the shoulder, but Dmitri was faster. One precise shot shattered Lorenzo's knee. "That," Dmitri said coldly, "was for touching my wife's sister." Natasha stepped forward. Her movement was predatory, elegant, deadly. "He's mine," she told Dmitri, "not a request, a declaration." Lorenzo laughed, a wet, broken sound. "You think you can kill me? Natasha's hand drove Dmitri's knife into his throat. Smooth, practiced, no hesitation. "I'm Bratva Queen," she whispered into his failing ear. "And you touched my sister." The arterial spray painted the mahogany walls. Lorenzo collapsed. Dmitri watched, something like pride and pure love burning in his eyes. His virgin bride, his deadly queen. Medical teams swarmed quickly. Professional, efficient. Vera would survive. The shoulder wound was clean, no major arteries hit. By 8 p.m., they'd relocated to Dmitri's safe house. Sterile white walls, medical equipment. Vera lay recovering, bandaged. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Natasha, "for betraying you, for telling father." Natasha's hand squeezed her sister's. "Never again. We protect each other. Always." Dmitri watched from the doorway. His world had transformed. A virgin no more. A man reborn through blood and love. "Tomorrow," he announced, "we return to Moscow, and we clean house." Vera drifted to sleep. Natasha turned to her husband, her monster, her protector. "Our house," she corrected. "Our rules." Outside, the Italian night waited. Quiet, deadly, perfect. The conference room in Dmitri's Moscow headquarters felt like a tomb. Cold marble floors, pristine white walls, and at the center, a massive oak table where generations of Bratva leaders had made life and death decisions. Mikhail stood first, his expensive suit pressed razor sharp, silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. "This woman has made you weak," he spat in Russian, pointing directly at Natasha. "A fat girl from nowhere who cannot produce pure heirs. She will destroy everything our family has built." Silence hung heavy. The other Bratva council members watched, waiting. Some nodded almost imperceptibly at Mikhail's words. Others studied Dmitri, measuring his response. Dmitri didn't move. His black suit fitted him like a second skin, not a single thread out of place. When he spoke, his voice was soft, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "You question my woman." Not a question. A statement of absolute fact. Mikhail laughed, a harsh bark. "I question your judgment, your leadership, your—" He never finished the sentence. Dmitri moved with the precise, deadly grace of a predator. One moment stationary, the next a blur of violent intent. Before anyone could breathe, he had a knife, his mother's ceremonial blade, pressed against Mikhail's throat. "Anyone who questions my woman," Dmitri repeated, "questions me." The blade moved, blood sprayed. Mikhail collapsed. No one made a sound. Natasha watched, her body tense but her face calm. She understood now. This wasn't just murder. This was a statement, a declaration of power. At precisely 1 p.m., she stepped forward. Her burgundy dress hugged her curves. A deliberate choice. She spoke in perfect, razor-sharp Russian. "My husband has shown you respect," she said. "I will show you strategy." She outlined their expansion plans. New shipping routes, strategic alliances, economic territories that would triple the Bratva's legitimate income. Her voice was clinical, professional, each word calculated to demonstrate she wasn't just Dmitri's wife, she was his equal. When she finished, even the oldest council members looked stunned. At 3 p.m., Viktor Petrov was brought in, the man who had tried to sell his daughters like cattle, who had collaborated with their enemies. Dmitri expected blood, revenge. Natasha surprised everyone. "Exile," she declared. to a remote village in Siberia. No connections, no resources. He will live and suffer, knowing everything he tried to accomplish has failed. Dmitri raised an eyebrow, then smiled. Mercy could be more devastating than death. By 5 p.m., their wedding was officially announced. 3 days, the entire criminal underworld would witness their union. Vera, recovering from her trauma, gave her blessing that evening. "Paris," she told them. "I want to study art, away from all this." Her hand swept across the room, encompassing the violence, the power. Dmitri nodded. "Consider it done." When they were finally alone that night, the passion erupted like a volcano. Dmitri's hands mapped her body like a conquistador claiming new territory. Every touch a promise, every kiss a declaration of ownership. "You saved me," he whispered against her skin, not just from enemies, from himself. At 2 a.m., they lay tangled in silk sheets discussing strategy. Ivan would be brought into the organization. Certain legitimate businesses would expand. The Bratva would evolve. Natasha traced the scars on Dmitri's chest. "We're building something new," she murmured. He pulled her closer. "Something dangerous. Something ours." Outside, Moscow slept. But inside this fortress, a new empire was being born, forged in blood, sealed with passion, ruled by two souls who understood that true power wasn't about destruction, but transformation. The cathedral bells rang out, heavy and resonant, marking every moment of anticipation. Natasha stood before the ornate mirror, surrounded by women who had once looked at her with suspicion and now watched her with fierce respect. The Bratva wives, hardened, beautiful, dangerous in their own right, adjusted her custom-designed wedding gown, a masterpiece that celebrated every curve of her body. "Breathe, Devochka," whispered Anya, the oldest wife, her hands steady as she pinned a delicate diamond brooch to Natasha's dress. The brooch had belonged to Dmitri's mother, a symbol of more than just jewelry, but of acceptance, of belonging. Vera stood behind her, tears glimmering but not falling. "You look like a queen," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted Natasha's veil. In another part of the cathedral, Dmitri moved like a predator. His tuxedo was black, tailored to perfection, concealing at least 3 weapons. Every entrance was checked and double-checked. Ivan stood nearby, watching his brother with a mixture of respect and lingering disbelief. "You realize this changes everything," Ivan murmured. Dmitri's smile was dangerous. Everything was already changing. By noon, the cathedral filled with 1,000 guests, rival families, criminal lords, politicians. Each seat represented a carefully calculated political move. No one came uninvited. No one arrived without purpose. When Natasha walked down the aisle, the room went silent. She wasn't a traditional bride. She was a statement. Her dress hugged her body, celebrating her curves, her strength. Her eyes locked with Dmitri's, and the entire world seemed to disappear. The ceremony was a dance of power and passion. When Dmitri spoke his vows, his voice low and intense, the words were more than a promise. They were a declaration of war against anyone who would challenge their union. "You came to me through deception," he said, "but became my truth. Your fire matched my darkness. You are my salvation." Natasha's response was fierce, her voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. "I choose your darkness. I choose your violence. I choose you." The kiss that followed wasn't soft. It was acclaiming, a statement that shocked and thrilled the assembled guests. This wasn't a traditional wedding, this was a coronation. At the reception, Natasha danced with Ivan, a gesture of family integration that spoke volumes. Dmitri watched, a predator's smile playing on his lips. When Viktor Petrov appeared, uninvited, desperate, he was quickly and quietly removed by Dmitri's men. "One last goodbye," Dmitri murmured to Natasha. "Your father gets that much mercy." As night fell, Dmitri carried Natasha to their honeymoon suite. The room was a blend of luxury and potential violence, silk sheets and hidden weapons, champagne and a view of Moscow that promised both beauty and danger. "Can you believe?" Natasha laughed, remembering the first day they met, the day she had slapped him. "How far we've come." Dmitri's laugh was dark, promising. "We're just beginning, my queen." Their wedding night was a celebration of their journey, passion that was both tender and fierce, a connection that transcended the violence of their world. They had found each other in the most unexpected way. Two souls forged in darkness, now united. Outside, Moscow watched. The Bratva whispered. A new order had been established, with Natasha and Dmitri at its center, not just as husband and wife, but as a force that would reshape everything they touched. The Mediterranean sun burned white-hot over Dimitri's private Greek island, casting diamond-like reflections across azure waters. Natasha stretched languidly on crisp white linen, her curves casting shadows that made Dimitri's breath catch. "I never thought I'd have this," he murmured, tracing the curve of her hip. His fingers, usually instruments of violence, now moved with reverent gentleness. They'd spent the day claiming every surface of the estate, the beach at noon, salty waves lapping around their entwined bodies, the pool at 3, where Dimitri had pressed her against marble tiles, worshipping every inch of her soft skin. Now at 6, they sat for dinner on the private terrace, crystal glasses of crisp white wine catching the sunset's golden light. "Twins," Natasha repeated, watching his reaction. "You really want twins?" Dimitri's eyes softened. "Like you and Vera, a built-in protector. Someone who always has your back." His phone buzzed. Ivan's face appeared, looking professional but relaxed. "Everything's smooth in Moscow. The new trafficking routes are secured. The council sends their respects." Natasha caught the slight hesitation. Respects, in Bratva language, often meant barely contained threat, but Dimitri's execution of his uncle had sent a clear message: challenge him and die. At 9, Vera's call came through. Her voice bubbled with excitement about the Sorbonne, about her art exhibition, about the freedom Dimitri had gifted her. "I'm finally living," she told Natasha, "and it's because of you." By 11, the power dynamic shifted. Natasha straddled Dimitri, her weight pressing him into silk sheets. Tonight she would claim him completely. "Look at me," she commanded. And for the first time, the most feared Pakan in Eastern Europe truly surrendered. Her hands pinned his wrists, her mouth traced the scars mapping his chest, each one a story of survival, of violence transformed. When she took him inside her, Dimitri's eyes glistened with an emotion far more dangerous than any weapon: total vulnerability. "I never thought I could have this," he whispered in Russian. "Love, power, both." At 2 a.m., they stood on the balcony. The Mediterranean stretched infinite and dark, matching the depth of their bond. Natasha placed his hand on her still flat belly. "We're writing new rules now," she said. Dimitri knelt, pressing reverent kisses against her stomach, whispering ancient Russian prayers for the life growing within, a future neither violence nor betrayal could touch. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a declaration. Some monsters find redemption. Some broken things heal. Some loves are forged in blood and tempered by an unbreakable bond. The Moscow morning light filtered through silk curtains, casting a soft glow on Natasha's expanding belly. 6 months of pregnancy had transformed her, but her presence remained as commanding as ever. She stood at the head of the mahogany conference table, her tailored black suit accentuating her curves, fingers dancing across a tablet as she led the Bratva meeting with surgical precision. Dimitri watched from the corner, a predatory smile playing on his lips. Gone was the man who would have scoffed at a woman leading his organization. Now he watched his wife with unbridled pride, knowing she had brought a new kind of strength to the family business. "The legitimate shipping routes through Rotterdam will increase our quarterly revenue by 22%, Natasha stated, her voice calm and authoritative. The men around the table, hardened criminals who once would have laughed at her presence, now listened with rapt attention. She had earned their respect through strategy, intelligence, and in ruthlessness that matched Dimitri's own. By 10 a.m., they were in Paris. Vera's art exhibition was a testament to survival, massive canvases depicting moments of transformation, of breaking free from invisible chains. Each painting told a story of resilience, of beauty born from pain. Natasha walked through the gallery, her hand on her belly, tears threatening to spill. "Look at you," she whispered to her sister. "You've become something extraordinary." Vera hugged her, careful of her pregnant belly. "We both did," she replied, echoing the words that had become their family's mantra. The afternoon found them back in Moscow, sharing dinner with Ivan and his new girlfriend. Family was expanding, healing. The old wounds of the Volkov bloodline were slowly mending, stitch by careful stitch. As evening approached, Dimitri led Natasha to the nursery he had personally designed. Soft Russian words tumbled from his lips as he spoke to their unborn children, his fingers tracing the intricate murals he had painted, scenes of Moscow, of their family's complicated history. "Your mother saved me," he murmured, pressing a kiss to Natasha's belly. She saw the monster and made him human. The intimacy of the moment was electric. By 7 p.m., they were locked in passionate embrace, Natasha riding Dmitri with a confidence that took his breath away. Her pregnant body, something she once would have been ashamed of, was now a weapon of desire. He worshipped every curve, every change, whispering Russian endearments that made her shiver. At 9 p.m., they stood before the mirror. Natasha's reflection showed a woman transformed. Powerful, pregnant, perfectly imperfect. "They sent 2 obese girls to insult you," she said, her eyes meeting Dmitri's in the glass. "Instead, you got a queen who matches your darkness." Dmitri's response was immediate. "We both won," he growled, pulling her close. By 11 p.m., they were in bed. Dmitri was between her thighs, his mouth and hands bringing her to heights of pleasure that made her entire body tremble. Her fingers gripped his hair, her voice raw with emotion. "Forever isn't long enough," she declared as she climaxed. And in that moment, they both knew the truth. They weren't just survivors, they were conquerors. The Bratva's new king and queen, bound by a love that defied every expectation, every limitation. Their darkness had found its match. Their story was just beginning.